The building I guard has 4 sub-levels. That's what orientation said. That's what every floor plan, elevator panel, and access schematic confirms. I know that's wrong, because last night I watched the elevator go somewhere that doesn't exist, and something rode it back up. My name is Dale Presswood, 44 years old, 18 years in federal corrections at a medium security facility in Leavenworth, Kansas, 2 marriages that couldn't survive the hours, and then a move to southeastern New Mexico for reasons I probably understood at the time but can no longer reconstruct. I needed work. What I had was a clean record, a valid guard card, a FEMA certification, and knees that still passed a physical even if they had opinions about it. What I didn't have was any interest in checking cargo manifests outside an Albuquerque warehouse for $12 an hour. The listing came through a federal placement firm. Vague the way government-adjacent postings are always vague when the specifics would raise more questions than the salary can answer. Security Specialist 2. Controlled Environment. TS/SCI. Eligibility required. The pay was roughly 2.5 times what corrections gave me. Location: Eddy County, which down here means potash flats, oil derricks, and the kind of emptiness that looks like God started a thought and wandered off. I applied on a Tuesday. Phone screen by Thursday. 11 weeks of background investigation. Started in September. The facility sits about 40 minutes south of Artesia on a fenced parcel you reach by state highway, then county road, then 6 miles of graded dirt with no sign marking the turn, 12-foot chain link topped with concertina wire, then a gap, then a second inner fence I was told carries current, though nobody has invited me to verify. The guard shack at the access gate runs around the clock. Past it sits a paved lot with space for 30 vehicles. I've never counted more than 9. And beyond the lot, a low, sand-colored building, flat-roofed, 1 story above grade. No windows except in the lobby and the front admin hall. It could be a water treatment plant. It could be a forgotten community college annex. Nothing about it invites a second look. My role was perimeter and internal security, night shift, 1900 to 0700, 5 on, 4 off. 2 per shift, 1 rover, 1 on the monitoring desk. I drew rover almost exclusively. My partner through most of my rotation was a man named Carla Dominguez. And I know that reads oddly, but that's his legal name and he never once explained it. Carla was ex-Air Force, built like a rain barrel and capable of a silence so complete it had its own atmosphere. When he did speak, it was about his daughter's travel softball tournaments, batting averages, bracket seedings, hotel logistics. He could discuss the Holiday Inn Express in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, the way certain men discuss wine. I liked him from the first week. Above grade, the building is simple. Lobby, admin offices. A break room whose microwave will smell like burned popcorn until the heat death of the universe. 2 meeting rooms, a janitor's closet, a mechanical space, and the security office. 8 monitors in 2 rows, a radio console, a desk scarred with carved initials that predated every living employee, and 2 chairs that had surrendered any pretense of comfort sometime during the previous administration. That's the entire first floor. Whatever the building actually exists to do, it does underground. You reach the sub-levels by freight elevator. Badge plus a 5-digit code that rotates weekly. Sub-level 1. Laboratory space. White corridors. Sealed doors with small observation windows. Rooms I could see into and a much larger number I couldn't. Sub-level 2. Listed as environmental control. Never specified further. Sub-level 3. Storage, cold storage. Decommissioned research bays. Sub-level 4. The lowest level on every document I was ever shown. Is containment. My clearance covered 1 through 3. 4 required a research escort and a specific request from the night lab supervisor. In 4 months, that happened exactly twice. Both times I was walked through a short corridor, waited outside a sealed door while someone checked something I couldn't see. and was walked back. Neither visit lasted 12 minutes. Neither answered any question I hadn't already learned not to ask. A typical night looked like this. Badge in at the shack. Drive to the lot. Change into the on-site uniform. Check radio. Flashlight. Keycard. Relieve the day rover. Carla would already be at the desk, usually nursing coffee that tasted like someone had described the concept of coffee to a machine that bore it a grudge. First patrol at 19:30. Lobby, admin corridor, mechanical room, elevator to 1, full loop, elevator to 2, accessible sections, elevator to 3, accessible sections, elevator up, loading dock, perimeter walk along the north and east fence lines. Back to the office. Log the route. 55 minutes. 4 times a night. 19:30. 2300 0230. 0500. Between patrols. Monitors. Bad coffee. Silence. It was boring. I mean that as a compliment. After 18 years of corrections, I understood that boredom is what a functioning security system feels like from the inside. Same corridors, same sealed doors, same fluorescent hum, same boot squeak on polished concrete. I was fine with it. For 4 months, the most unusual thing I encountered was a single latex glove lying on the sub-level 3 floor. It shouldn't have been there. 3 was supposedly inactive. I logged it, Carla initialed the entry, and by next shift it was gone. That was my entire incident history until January 14th. 2300 patrol. Sub-level 1. Normal. Green status lights across the board. I finished the loop, returned to the elevator. Badge for 2. Entered the code. Rode down. The doors opened and the air had weight to it. Not temperature. Pressure. Like stepping from a hallway into a gymnasium. That subtle shift in how sound carries. The way your ears adjust before your mind catches up. I stopped just outside the car and listened. The sub-level 2 ventilation runs at a specific pitch, a low drone I'd grown so accustomed to that I only noticed it when something changed. That night it was present, but underneath it ran something else. Slower. Rhythmic in a way machines aren't, because machines don't hesitate between cycles. This did. A throb that felt almost tidal, as if the building's circulatory system had developed a second heartbeat that didn't quite sync with the first. HVAC variance. Complicated system, old infrastructure, not my expertise. I walked the route. Green lights, sealed doors. Everything where it should be. I returned to the elevator and badged for sub-level 3. Nothing happened. The indicator showed the car on 2. I tried again. Badge, code, button. The system accepted the input, gave me the green confirmation chirp, and sat there, dead still. This had happened once before, about 6 weeks in. Carla's fix had been simple. Cycle the badge, re-enter everything. I did that. The car moved. The doors opened onto a corridor I had never seen. Dimmer lighting. Not broken, deliberately reduced, maybe 60% of the upper floors. The walls were bare concrete. Every level I'd ever walked was coated in that government-issue semi-gloss, the color of expired milk. Here there was nothing, raw grey, unsealed. The floor was the same. No epoxy, no tile, just concrete with a faint sheen that looked almost damp under the reduced light. The corridor ran straight for about 40 feet and ended at a T-junction. No doors, no observation windows, no status indicators of any kind. And the smell. Chemical on top, astringent, industrial. The kind of sanitizer that exists to convince you a surface has been sterilized. But beneath that, something the chemical hadn't quite killed. I've encountered it before in medical settings. Not decay, The smell of living tissue exposed to air it shouldn't be touching. Warm, organic. Faintly sweet in a way that turns your stomach before your brain can identify why. The elevator panel behind me read SL4. Protocol was unambiguous. Contact the monitoring station. Report the access error. Return immediately. I keyed the radio. Carla, it's Dale. Elevator dropped me to 4. No authorization, no escort. Coming back up. Pause. Copy. Log it when you're here. I reached for the panel, and in the 3 seconds before my hand made contact, standing perfectly still in that dim, unpainted corridor, I heard something from beyond the T-junction. A slow, wet sound. Heavy, deliberate, like a large joint rotating inside its socket. One single movement, thick with fluid, followed by absolute stillness. My hand hit the button before the sound finished registering. The doors were closing before my brain caught up with my body. 18 years in a federal prison will grind your startle reflex down to almost nothing. Almost. That sound found what was left. I logged the elevator malfunction back in the security office. Carla initialed it. We didn't discuss it further. I did not log the sound. In this line of work, you write down what you can describe precisely. Unidentified noise is not an observation. It's a reason for someone to ask whether you should be making observations at all. So I kept it off the page, but it stayed in my chest. Not as memory exactly, as residue, the way a very low frequency can settle into your bones and take hours to dissipate. 2 nights later, January 16th, 0230 patrol, 1. 1 and 2 were clean, though that denser air on 2 was still present, still hovering just below the threshold where I'd feel justified reporting it. 3 was normal. I came back to the office. Anything different on 2 tonight? I asked, mostly to hear a human voice. Carla didn't look up. Like what? Air's heavier, has been for a few shifts. Environmental's been pressure testing the scrubbers on the lower levels. Been running all week. Plausible enough. I let it go. At 03:15, Carla said, 6 is down. Camera 6 covered the sub-level 3 east corridor, the storage wing. It had dropped twice in the previous month, both times blamed on a wiring fault in the junction box, both times self-correcting within the hour. A known issue. A boring issue. We watched the blank feed and waited. 03:40. Camera 6 came back. The corridor looked exactly the way it always did. Concrete floor, white walls, 3 sealed doors on the left, fire extinguisher on the right. At the far end, the door to cold storage unit B, which was standing wide open. Not ajar, not cracked. 90 degrees, flat against the interior wall, the way a door stands when someone has walked through and isn't coming back. Carla? He was already looking. He picked up the desk phone and dialed a 4-digit extension. It rang 7 times. 8. 9. He hung up. Dialed again. Someone answered on the second ring. Carla described what we were seeing. Flat, specific, no editorializing. He said copy twice and put the phone down. Lab supervisor's sending someone. Stay here. On the monitor, the corridor was silent and still. The door stayed open. 11 minutes passed. Then a figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. White coat, badge lanyard. The unhurried pace of someone performing a task they've done before. The figure walked to the door, glanced inside, reached in and pulled it shut, and walked back the way they'd come. The whole thing had the energy of someone closing a cupboard after dinner. Carla called the same extension. 15 seconds of conversation. Hung up. Latch failure, he said. Work order going in. I didn't respond immediately. I'd checked that door at 2300. magnetic lock, manual deadbolt, seal indicator, green when intact, red when breached. At 2300, it had been green. For that door to be standing open the way it appeared on camera, someone would have needed to disengage the maglock, retract the deadbolt manually, and pull it open from the corridor side. Or something on the other side had pushed through. That door was sealed 4 hours ago, I said. Latch failure, Carla said and picked up his coffee. He wasn't being evasive. He was being professional. In a classified facility, you work within your clearance level. If the lab supervisor calls it a latch, it's a latch. You note it, initial it, and move on. I'd operated the same way in corrections for 2 decades. You don't need to understand what's behind the door to know the door should be shut. But I also knew what that seal indicator looked like when it was intact, and at 2300, it had been intact. 3 quiet shifts followed, clean patrols, normal readings. Camera 6 stayed online. The CSUB door stayed closed. The air on 2 returned to baseline. Or I stopped measuring the difference. I walked my routes, logged my entries, went home to Artesia, fed my dog, watched television, slept. On January 22nd, there was a memo in my locker, typed on plain white paper. No letterhead, no signature block, no date. Effective immediately, the 2330 patrol route is modified as follows. Sub-level 3 East Corridor, storage wing, is temporarily restricted. Rover will proceed from sub-level 2 directly to exterior perimeter check. Duration until further notice. I brought it to Carla. Got the same, he said. No authorization signature. It was in your locker, Dale. Somebody with access put it there. He wasn't wrong. Route modifications weren't unusual. Sections got restricted for cleaning, equipment swaps, work that happened at clearance levels I didn't hold. What caught my attention was the absence of an end date. Until further notice is loose language for a facility that normally measures everything in precise increments. I followed the modification. 3 shifts. Bypassed the East Corridor on my 2300 loop. Logged the deviation with a memo reference each time. Nothing remarkable. On January 25th, during my 1930 patrol, which the memo hadn't touched, I walked the East Corridor as usual, past the 3 sealed doors, past the fire extinguisher, toward Cold Storage Unit B. The floor stopped me. Not damaged, not stained, clean. Clean in a way that was wrong. The sealed concrete on sub-level 3 carries a permanent scuff record, boot prints, equipment wheel tracks, the accumulated archaeology of foot traffic between cleaning cycles. I knew what that floor looked like, the way you know your own kitchen counter. On January 25th, the 8-foot section directly in front of CSUB was immaculate. Not mopped, stripped. The scuff history had been erased. The surface looked freshly poured. 10 feet past the door, normal wear resumed. The anomaly was confined to that one zone. I crouched and swept my flashlight across it. No chemical residue, no fresh sealant smell. Just new-looking concrete where old concrete should have been, except for one mark, dead center, a groove, 10 inches long, slightly curved, pressed into the surface with enough force to score the sealant. It didn't match a boot or a caster wheel. It looked like something heavy had been dragged across the floor in a single slow stroke, or had dragged itself. I logged it. Clinical language, specific measurements, photo documentation recommended. Back in the office, I told Carla. "You're writing up a clean floor," he said. "I'm documenting a change." "Then document it." I did. Next morning I mentioned it to the day rover. "Petty." He said he'd look. When I came back that night, no follow-up note, no acknowledgement. Petty's sub-level 3 entry read, "All clear, no anomalies." Either he hadn't looked, or he'd looked and disagreed with what I'd seen. I wasn't sure which possibility sat worse. January 28th. Second memo. Same anonymous format. Revised patrol addendum. During all patrol cycles, rover will visually confirm the corridor seal indicator on CSUB from no closer than 15 feet. Do not approach the door. Do not make physical contact with the door or frame. Report indicator status by color only. I read it 3 times in the locker bay because I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining the strangeness of being told to maintain a 15-foot buffer from a storage room door. In my experience, distance rules exist for 2 categories of things: hazardous materials and things that are alive. Cold storage units aren't supposed to contain either. I showed Carla, asked him about it, and for the first and only time, something shifted behind his expression. I recognized it from corrections. That look a senior officer gives a newer man who started asking about a particular cell, a particular wing, a particular inmate that everyone else learned long ago to leave alone. Not hostility. Exhaustion, wearing the uniform of patience. Somebody with more clearance than us wrote the protocol, he said. You and I follow protocol. I followed it. For 2 weeks, my patrols became almost meditative. Walk the halls, check the doors. Stop 15 feet from CSUB. Read the indicator. Green. Always green. Note it. Move on. But during the dead hours between patrols, sitting at the monitoring station, I started paying closer attention to the screens. And I noticed something that should have caught my eye on day 1. 8 cameras, 1 through 7 mapped logically to the building spaces. Lobby, admin corridor, sublevels 1 through 3, loading dock. Camera 8 was labeled on the monitor housing in faded white stencil, SL4/primary, and its screen showed a flat, even grey. Not static, not black. A featureless grey field. The kind of non-image you get from a camera that's connected and powered but pointed at nothing. Or from a feed that someone has deliberately muted. Has 8 ever worked? I asked Carla one night around 0100. He glanced at it. Not since I've been here. 3 years. At least. And nobody's repaired it. The containment level's dedicated camera feed, and it's been grey for a minimum of 3 years. He gave me that look again. What we see up here is what they've decided we need to see. I dropped it, but I didn't stop watching that screen. Not because I expected it to change, because staring at it produced the same feeling I'd had standing in the unpainted corridor on sub-level 4. The awareness of something nearby and perfectly still. Not waiting, exactly. Choosing not to move. There's a difference, and I could feel it in my teeth. February 9th. 2 things. First, during my 1930 patrol on sub-level 1, I passed Lab 6 and heard a sound from inside. Lab 6 was always dark and locked during my shifts. The sound was a voice, or something using the shape of a voice. A single sustained tone, steady in pitch. No words, no modulation. Produced at a volume that wasn't trying to reach me through the door, but also wasn't trying to hide. It went on for the entire time I stood there. No intake of breath, no pause, no variation. One continuous note sustained well past the point where any human lung should have emptied. The door was locked. Status light green. Through the observation window I could make out the first few feet of interior lab bench, equipment, empty stools, no person. I keyed the radio. Carla, I'm outside Lab 6. Continuous vocalization coming from inside. Sealed, green indicator. No visible occupant. Say again. I repeated it. Stood there. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the sound stopped. Not tapered. Stopped. Mid-tone, instant. The way a playback stops when someone presses a button. Lab supervisor says they left an audio calibration test running on a timer, Carla said after a pause that was slightly longer than the phone call should have required. Should have shut off before your patrol, they apologize. Copy. I moved on. But I carried the word calibration with me for the rest of the shift, turning it over because I've spent enough years around institutional explanations to recognize the difference between one that was prepared and one that was assembled in the 30 seconds between a phone ringing and a phone being answered. The second thing happened at 0300. Carla had stepped out to the restroom. I was alone with the monitors. Camera 8 changed. The grey didn't become an image. It shifted, the upper left quadrant brightening fractionally, as though a faint light source had appeared somewhere in whatever space the camera was pointed at. 4 seconds. Then it faded back to uniform grey. When Carla returned, I told him. Electrical fluctuation, he said. Old monitors. Maybe. You want to log it? I considered what the entry would look like. A camera that's been dead for 3+ years briefly displayed a slight tonal variation that may or may not indicate a light source on the containment level. I'd sound like someone building a case instead of performing a job. No, I said. But over the following week, it happened again. February 11th. Same quadrant. 10 seconds. February 13th. 6 seconds. But the variation was sharper. The edge between the lighter and darker regions, too straight to be random noise. February 15th. 20 seconds. And the lighter area moved. Drifted from left to center, the way a shadow moves when the thing casting it is walking. The intervals were shortening. The duration was increasing. The occurrence was drifting earlier in the shift, as if whatever was producing the light source was arriving sooner each night, or moving closer to the lens. February 16th, I logged it, kept the language flat. Camera 8 displayed brief tonal variation at 22:47 hours, duration approximately 8 seconds, monitor function check recommended. The next night, a technician appeared. Mid-50s, unmarked coveralls, no name patch. First time I'd ever seen a tech in the building after dark. He spent 20 minutes looking at Camera 8's monitor housing. Looking, not touching. Checked something on a tablet. Left without acknowledging either of us. After he was gone, I opened the log to reference my previous entry. It was still there. But below my handwriting in small, neat print I didn't recognize, someone had added, resolved. Monitor capacitor intermittent. Scheduled for replacement. The technician had not touched the log. He hadn't come within 5 feet of it. I'd been sitting 8 feet away the entire time he was in the room. Carla, who added to my entry? He leaned over. Read it. Tech, probably. They pre-fill sometimes. Pre-fill a resolution for something that didn't exist until I reported it 14 hours ago. That faint jaw clench. The only outward sign of tension I ever saw in him. Dale, let it go. I need to tell you about my dog. Because my dog is the reason I'm telling you this from my kitchen, instead of a room where someone is evaluating my mental state. His name is Rudy. Beagle mix. 7 years old from a shelter in Topeka. I got him the year my second marriage ended, and he has been the most stable relationship of my adult life. He sleeps on my bed, eats at 6:15, morning and evening, with a punctuality that shames most humans, barks at the mailman with a conviction that suggests he regards the postal service as an existential threat to our household. He is utterly ordinary, and that is exactly the point. Every morning when I drove home from that facility and opened my front door, and Rudy was there, warm, breathing, perfectly himself, the world reassembled around normal coordinates. Whatever was happening inside that fence 40 minutes south stayed inside that fence. Out here was Artesia, and the mail came at 10:15, and floors carried their scuff marks undisturbed, and nothing rewrote itself overnight. That's the context I need you to hold, because what follows is the part where the fence stopped mattering. February 22nd. Shift start. Badge the shack. Tony waved me through. Parked, entered, changed, checked equipment, walked to the security office to relieve day shift. The office was empty. Monitors running. Log open on the desk. The last entry was from the Day Rover's 1400 patrol. After that, nothing. 5 hours of blank page. Carla arrived a few minutes behind me. Saw the same thing. Picked up the phone. Day supervisor. No answer. Night lab supervisor. No answer. Front gate. Tony, where's day shift? Tony's voice, thin through the receiver. Signed out at 1600. Both of them. Normal departure. Then there's a 3-hour gap in the log. I don't know what to tell you, Carla. He hung up. Wrote a clean entry noting the discrepancy. Looked at me. Let's run it clean. 1930 patrol. Lobby normal. Admin corridor normal. Sub-level 1. Sealed doors. Green lights. I passed lab 6. Stopped. Listened. Silence this time. Moved on. Sub-level 2. Dense air. Green lights. That ventilation hum with its phantom undertone. Completed the loop. Sub-level 3. The 1930 route was unmodified. I still walked the east corridor at this hour. West side first, normal. Then the turn into the storage wing. I stopped at the corner. The stripped section in front of cold storage unit B was back, but it had grown. What had been 8 feet wide was now at least 15, extending from the door to well past the corridor's center and reaching partway up the opposite wall. The cleaning, or whatever had caused it, had gone vertical, as though something had needed to be removed, not just from the floor, but from the wall itself. And the marks. Not one groove this time. Several. The same type, 10 to 12 inches long, slightly curved, pressed into the sealant, but arranged in a radiating pattern, fanning outward from the base of the CSUB door like spokes of an unfinished wheel. Every single one pointed away from the door and toward the T-junction, toward the elevator. I stood at my 15-foot mark and checked the door. Indicator green. Sealed. But the door was wrong. From that distance, in that lighting, you'd have to know the door intimately to notice. I did. I'd checked it hundreds of times. When CSUB is properly sealed, the door face sits perfectly flush with the steel frame's outer edge. On February 22nd, it was recessed, maybe 1/8 of an inch, as though the door had been reseated but not quite returned to its original position, or as though something behind it had pressed outward with enough force to deform the frame, and then pulled back. I logged everything. 15-foot visual, indicator green, door sealed, floor anomaly, expanded area, radiating marks, direction of travel consistent with movement away from CSUB toward elevator access. Door alignment discrepancy noted. Carla read it twice. You're sure about the door? I'm sure. He dialed the night lab supervisor. Someone answered on the second ring this time. Carla read my entry verbatim, listened, said copy, and hung up. They're sending someone. Within the hour. 40 minutes later, the elevator indicator on our wall panel showed the car descending. Past 1, past 2, down to 3. It held there 19 minutes. Then it descended further. Past 3, past where 4 should be, to a depth the panel didn't have a label for. The indicator simply showed the car below the lowest marked position, hanging in unmarked space. Carla and I watched it. Where is that? I asked. He didn't answer. 7 minutes at that depth. Then the car rose. Back through 4, 3, 2, 1. Ground floor. Camera 1 showed the elevator doors opening in the lobby. 2 figures in white coats stepped out, turned left, and exited through the loading dock without stopping at the security office. Camera 7 caught them crossing to an unmarked vehicle and driving toward the gate. No call, no debrief. At 0100, Carla's personal cell rang. He wasn't supposed to carry it on shift. He looked at the screen, stood, walked into the hallway, and closed the door behind him. 4 minutes. When he came back, he sat down and placed both hands flat on the desk, pressing hard, the way you press your hands down when you need them to stop doing something else. Dale, skip the 0230 patrol. Why? Log a headache? I'll confirm. Carla. Why? His voice dropped into a register I hadn't heard from him before. Still level, but the levelness was costing him something. Something is being moved tonight. Lower levels. Between 0200 and 0400. We are not supposed to be down there during the transfer. Moved from where? I don't know. To where? I don't know. What is it? He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the look behind them was the closest thing to a plea I'd ever seen on his face. I don't know. And I'm not going to find out. And neither are you. I logged a headache. Carla confirmed it. We sat in the security office and watched the monitors. 0217. Camera 3. Sub-level 1. Drop to black. 0218. Camera 4. Sub-level 2. Black. 0219. Cameras 5 and 6. Both sub-level 3 corridors. Black simultaneously. Every sub-level feed was gone. Lobby and loading dock stayed live. Camera 8. The grey screen. The dead feed was still on. The grey shifted. The brightening appeared in the upper left quadrant, stronger than I'd ever recorded, and this time it moved with purpose. Not the slow drift of previous weeks. A smooth, continuous transit from left to center to right, covering the full width of the frame in maybe 8 seconds. At the right edge, it paused, held for 30 seconds. Then the entire screen went dark. Not grey. Black. True. Lightless black. The feed of a working camera in a room with no remaining illumination. Whatever had been pacing that room for weeks had stopped pacing. It had left. The sub-level cameras stayed dark for nearly 90 minutes. At 0341, all 4 restored simultaneously. Every corridor looked exactly as it should. Sub-level 1, empty. 2, empty. 3, doors sealed, green indicators, floors normal. Camera 8 returned to grey. The elevator indicator showed the car at ground level. It hadn't moved, according to the panel, since the lab team used it hours before. So whatever had been transferred hadn't used the elevator, which meant there was infrastructure inside that building I'd never been shown. At 0500, I walked my final patrol. Everything locked, every light green. The floor in front of CSUB was no longer stripped. The normal scuff pattern had returned, undisturbed, as though the weeks of immaculate concrete had been something I'd imagined. The door sat flush in its frame, indicator green, sealed. Everything was correct. Everything was exactly where it should be. And that was the thing that made my hands unsteady, because floors don't unstrip themselves. Scuff marks don't grow back. Concrete doesn't heal. I returned to the office, opened the log to write my entry, and found it already written. Small, neat print I didn't recognize. Not Carla's, not Petty's, not mine. 0500 patrol complete. All levels clear. No anomalies. Presswood, D. My name, my patrol. Written in someone else's hand while I was still walking the route. I showed Carla. He stared at it for a long time. Then he took the pen from my hand, drew a single line through the entry, and beside it wrote, Entry, not authored by Presswood. Origin unknown. Actual 0500 report follows. He handed the pen back. It was the most deliberate act of loyalty I'd witnessed in 2 decades of working alongside other men. He was putting his name next to a statement that said, "Something in this building is writing our logs for us, and it knows our names." Carla Dominguez resigned 9 days later. I came in on March 3rd to find a woman named Tran at the monitoring station, pulled from days to cover the vacancy. Carla hadn't mentioned leaving. 3 years at the facility, and he was gone without a conversation. Tran delivered the news the way you'd mention a schedule change. I thought about following him. The contract math argued against it. Early termination would have erased my savings. I had the lease. I had Rudy. And the rational voice. The corrections-trained voice. The voice that had kept me functional through 18 years of institutional work, pointed out what was technically true. I had no evidence. Clean floors. A flickering monitor. An unexplained log entry. Nothing that would survive a sentence beginning with, "I believe." So I stayed. My new permanent partner arrived in late March. Oberfeld, 28, ex-Navy, still operating at the sensitivity level where everything registers because you haven't yet learned which signals are load-bearing and which are just noise. I didn't tell him about Camera 8 or the corridor on 4 or the transfer. I followed protocol, walked my routes, stayed 15 feet from CSUB, logged my patrols. Through all of March and into April, nothing happened. Camera 8 stayed grey. The memos stopped. The air on 2 settled. I walked my corridors in a silence that I tried very hard to interpret as peace rather than patience. The building's patience, not mine. Then last night, April 7th, I opened my locker and found the 3rd memo. Effective immediately, all nighttime interior patrols are suspended. Rover will perform exterior perimeter checks only. Do not enter the building below the ground floor between 2200 and 0500. This directive supersedes all previous patrol schedules. Oberfeld had the same one. So what do we do for 6 hours? Watch monitors. Walk the fence. At 2200 I went outside. Clear night, mid-30s. The desert cold that sits on your skin like sheet metal. Stars so dense the sky looked like a lit membrane with dark spots, rather than the other way around. The lot held 3 vehicles. Mine, Oberfeld's, Tony's at the gate. No sound but wind and the faint electrical hum of the perimeter floods. I walked the full fence line. North, east, south, west. Everything intact. I was heading back to the entrance when something on the south wall stopped me. The south face of the building is the most featureless. No dock, no doors, just flat concrete, meeting a concrete apron, meeting dirt. I'd walked it hundreds of times. I could have described every stain and mineral streak from memory. There was a vent in the foundation that had never existed before. Ground level, 2 feet wide, 18 inches tall. Steel grate. New. Clean. Bolt heads still showing bright tool steel without a trace of oxidation. Behind the grate, a vertical shaft descending into total darkness. I crouched and looked. Smooth concrete walls. No bottom visible within flashlight range. Rising from the shaft on a faint updraft. The smell. The same one from January. From the corridor on 4. Chemical on top. Biological beneath. But the ratio had changed. The sanitizer was thinner now. What it had been covering was closer to the surface. Warm. Present. The smell of something alive in a space not designed for living things. I stood and stepped back. Under my boots, 3 pulses moved through the concrete apron. Evenly spaced, each roughly a second, localized and rhythmic. Not seismic, not mechanical. Something that understood rhythm. Then stillness. Inside. Security office. Oberfeld on his phone. There's a new vent on the south foundation wall, I told him. Ground level. Steel grate. It was not there before tonight. He looked up. Construction, probably. They're always working on... No, there's no work order. No notification. A new penetration in the building envelope of a facility with a containment level. And security was not informed. Dale, I've been here 3 weeks. I don't know what's normal. Fair enough. He didn't. But I did. At 0100 I went back to the south wall. The grate had changed. It was bowed outward. Maybe half an inch. The steel flexed by sustained pressure from inside the shaft. The metal was warm. Mid-30s ambient temperature, and the grate felt like it had been sitting in afternoon sun. I put my flashlight to the bars and aimed down. The beam died at about 10 feet. Smooth walls, nothing visible. But sound rose from below, distorted by the shaft's acoustics into something stripped of texture and reduced to its barest components. The wet rotation, the joint sound from January, louder now, closer, heavy with fluid. And underneath it, something new. A thin, sustained scraping. Something hard drawn along concrete in a slow, continuous stroke. The sound a ceramic edge would make dragged along a wall by something that was walking. Steady, rhythmic, rising, getting louder, measurably. Whatever was producing it was climbing. I withdrew the flashlight, stood, walked back to the entrance at a pace that was controlled but honest about wanting to be faster. Inside. Door closed. Security office. Sat down. Dale, you're white. Don't go near the south wall. Before Oberfeld could respond, camera 8 changed. Not a flicker. Not a gradual shift. The grey screen filled with a clear, full-colour, high-resolution image. Crisp and immediate, as if someone had been holding a hand over the lens for 7 months and simply pulled it away. A room. Large. Low ceiling. Raw concrete walls under harsh overhead fluorescence that turned everything the colour of a specimen jar. The floor was covered, nearly every visible inch, in overlapping grooves. The same curved scoring marks from outside CSUB, but hundreds of them, layered and relayered, the accumulated record of something pacing the same space over and over and over for a very long time. Center of the room, a shape, roughly 6 feet tall, maybe 4 feet wide at the base, covered by a black tarp or drape that hung to the floor. The drape moved. Not with ventilation rhythm, in slow, arrhythmic pulses. Expansion, contraction, the autonomous breathing of something that doesn't need to think about breathing. Oberfeld, camera 8. He turned and went still. We watched. The drape pulsed. The room was silent on our feed. No audio from the sub-levels, but the image was sharp enough to count individual grooves in the concrete, to see where the tarp bunched and folded at the floor. What is that? Oberfeld said. I don't know. Should we call someone? I thought about Carla, hands flat on the desk, the single line through the log entry that wasn't mine, the word unknown in his steady handwriting. 9 days later, gone. No, log it exactly as we see it. Camera 8 active at 0123. Feed shows room consistent with sub-level 4. Unidentified covered object, center of frame. No personnel visible. Exactly that. He wrote it down. We watched. At 0131, the drape moved in a way that was different from the breathing. One side lifted, drawn upward from within, as though something underneath had extended a limb laterally and pushed the fabric aside. For roughly 2 seconds, I saw what was underneath. I'm going to describe this as precisely as I can, because precision is the only tool I have that nobody has tampered with yet. It was pale, not skin color pale, light deprivation pale, the color of something that has never been exposed to any spectrum. The surface resembled skin but behaved like membrane. slightly translucent. The darker structures beneath it visible the way veins show through the inside of your wrist, except more so. Much more. As though the covering layer was one cell thick. Beneath it I could see geometries, angles, junctions. Something that could have been a joint, oriented about 30 degrees off from any human articulation. A limb segment, if that's what it was, too long for its width. Curving gently in the wrong direction, articulated at a point that would be an elbow if elbows bent backward. The membrane caught the fluorescent light, and for a moment I saw movement beneath it. A rhythmic pulse traveling through the darker structures. Circulatory. Alive. The tarp settled back. 12 seconds of the empty room. Then the screen went grey. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then the elevator indicator moved. The car descended. Past 1, past 2, past 3, past 4, down to the unmarked depth, held for 40 seconds. Rose. Past 4, past 3, past 2, past 1. Arrived at ground level. Camera 1, lobby. The doors opened on an empty car. But the lobby floor between the elevator and the main corridor was wet, not puddled. Smeared, a wide, irregular track, the mark of something heavy and damp being drawn across a smooth surface. It ran from the elevator doors toward the admin corridor and off the edge of the frame. Camera 2. Admin corridor. The track continued, thinner but visible, past the break room, past the meeting rooms, past the closed door of the security office where we were sitting, toward the front entrance. I opened the office door and looked into the hallway. The floor was wet, a track roughly 2 feet wide, running from the elevator's direction toward the lobby. It glistened under the fluorescence with a faint iridescence. Not water. Thicker, slightly opalescent. The smell hit me immediately. The same chemical over biological signature, stronger than I'd ever encountered it. Not a ghost of a scent anymore. The thing itself. The track led to the main entrance. The glass lobby door was closed. Badge access sealed. Indicator locked. But on the interior surface of the glass, at roughly its center, there was a mark. A smear of the iridescent fluid, pressed flat against the glass from inside, in a shape. My brain tried to file it as a handprint. It was close. It was almost there. But the proportions refused to resolve. Too many digits, or digits too long, or a palm too wide. I couldn't settle on which, because the geometry kept slipping past the templates I was applying to it. It looked like something that had studied what a hand was and produced its best working model, close enough to recognize, wrong enough that recognition made it worse. I closed the door. Call the front gate. Oberfeld dialed. 12 rings. Nothing. He dialed again. 20. Nothing. Try his cell. I don't have Tony's number. Neither did I. Carla would have. Camera 1. The wet track was already fading. The fluid evaporating or absorbing into the concrete at a rate nothing water-based should manage. The print on the glass was lighter. Whatever had pressed itself against that door, whatever had stood in our lobby and reached for the exit with an approximation of a human hand, was on the other side of it now, outside. 2:14. Sunrise wouldn't come until 06:30. 4 hours and 16 minutes. We stay in this room, I said. We don't open that door. We don't go into the hall. We don't go outside. Dale. Sit down. Watch the monitors. Log everything. He sat. We watched. Over the next 3.5 hours, this is what the cameras showed us. 2:30. Camera 7. The loading dock. The steel roll-up door flexed inward. Visibly. A slow, sustained deformation at the center of the panel held for 4 seconds, as though something outside was leaning into it, testing the material, learning what it could take. The flex released. The door held. But a faint residual bow remained in the panel that hadn't been there before. Oh, 2:51. The exterior floods on the north fence line went dark. We could see it through the security office's small window. The perimeter swallowed into blackness, the scrub beyond the wire vanishing. 6 minutes. Then the lights returned. The fence line looked identical, but lights don't extinguish for 6 minutes and restart themselves without cause, and the interior power never wavered. Oh, 3:17. Camera 1. The print on the glass was gone. The lobby floor was dry. No residue. No stain. As if nothing had ever crossed that floor. As if nothing had pressed itself against the exit with something that was trying to be a hand. Oh, 3:40. Camera 8 activated. Same room. Same fluorescence. The tarp lay crumpled against the far wall. Whatever had been beneath it was gone. The grooves on the floor were the same dense pattern, but new ones overlaid them. Fresh cuts at a sharper angle, leading from the center of the room to a point off the right edge of the frame. A departure vector, a direction of travel. Oh, 4:12. Through the building's exterior wall, from the direction of the south foundation, a sound reached us. A single percussive impact. Deep, resonant, the concussion of something heavy falling into a shaft from significant height. I felt it in my chair. One pulse, then silence. Oh, 4:15. Camera 8 returned to grey. We did not move from that room until 0700. Day shift arrived. 2 officers I'd never seen before. Different badge colour. Blue where mine was green. They entered the security office with the easy bearing of men who know something you don't. Quiet night. I pointed at the log. 3 full pages, every timestamp, every camera event, every observation Oberfeld and I had documented between 0100 and dawn. The blue badge officer read it, all of it. His expression didn't change. When he finished, he closed the log, reached down, and opened a drawer in the desk that I had never seen opened in 7 months of sitting at that desk. He placed the log inside, took out a fresh one, same format, same binding, opened it to the first blank page and set it on the desk. We'll take it from here. Thanks for a thorough shift. The original log is being reviewed. You're relieved. I changed, walked to my truck. The morning light was flat and orange. On the way across the lot, I looked at the south wall. The vent was gone. Where it had been, where I'd crouched, where I'd heard the scraping, where I'd felt the warmth of steel that should have been cold, there was blank concrete. No grate, no bolts, no seam, no shadow of a cut. The wall was featureless, as if nothing had ever opened there, as if nothing had ever climbed up through it. I drove home, opened the door. Rudy was there. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down everything I've just told you, because the log is gone, and the vent is gone, and the floor is dry, and the glass is clean. And every physical trace of what happened last night has been removed or erased or absorbed back into the building's official version of itself. This account and Oberfeld's memory are the only evidence that anything happened at all. About Oberfeld, I drove past the facility an hour ago, just to look. His car was not in the lot. His shift doesn't start for 3 hours, so that could mean nothing. It could also mean exactly what Carla's empty chair meant on March 3rd. It's late afternoon now. My shift starts in 3 hours. And there is something new, a message in my email. I have never received facility communications by email. Every directive I've gotten in 7 months came on unsigned paper in my locker. This email came from an address I don't recognize, with no subject line. Presswood, D. Your patrol route has been updated. Please confirm receipt. New route includes sub-level 5. There is no sub-level 5. Orientation said 4. Every document, every badge matrix, every elevator panel, every floor plan says 4. But I've stood on a level that doesn't appear on any of those records. I know what the air tastes like down there. I know the sound that comes from around corners you can't see past. And now the building, or whoever is speaking for the building, is telling me by name that there is a 5th level, and that my route goes through it. Rudy is asleep on the kitchen floor beside my chair. His back legs twitch the way they do when he's chasing something in a dream. In 3 hours, I'll put on my boots, drive 40 minutes south, badge in at the gate, and walk into a building that has spent 7 months insisting it has 4 sub-levels and is now, tonight, casually admitting to a 5th. The same building that cleaned its own floors, sealed its own walls, wrote its own logs in my name, and erased every trace of what moved through it last night. The wet track, the impossible handprint, the thing that pressed against the loading dock door to see if it would give. The thing that bothers me most isn't what escaped. It's the vent. The vent that appeared in the foundation and then vanished without a seam. Because that means the building didn't just let something out. He made a door for it, and then unmade the door. And now the only opening it's offering is the one it's telling me to walk through. Sub-level 5. Tonight. On my route. Rudy just lifted his head. He's looking at the front door. Ears forward, body locked, not barking, not growling. Just watching it with the total stillness of an animal that has detected something it has no framework for. Not afraid. Not yet. Just aware of a presence on the other side that doesn't match anything in his experience. He's been staring for about 30 seconds now. He hasn't blinked. I need to get my boots on.